still remember that morning as if it were carved into my bones, a Tuesday, early February, the kind of cold that turns your breath to mist the moment it leaves your lips. Cleveland was strangely silent. No car horns, no machines humming from the riverside factories, only the wind slapping against old steel beams creaking like the groan of tired metal. I rode my bike along the Cuyahoga embankment as I did every day, just far enough to escape the heaviness in my chest. But only a few seconds later, everything inside me broke apart. Beneath the bridge, where light barely squeezed through the gaps, I saw something dark moving. At first, I thought it was just a trash bag someone had tossed away. Then it stirred. As I got closer, the stench of dried blood and machine oil filled my throat, sharp and metallic. She was lying there, a mother Doberman, so thin her ribs rose one by one like the keys of an old piano. A rusted chain bit deep into her neck, hooked to a broken steel beam. The wound was swollen and crusted with pus and red dust. On the cold cement floor, two tiny puppies no bigger than my hands huddled close, trembling. I dropped to my knees. My fingers touched her coat, stiff cold, almost metallic. She opened her eyes, clouded yet conscious. No bark, no growl, just a stare. And in that stare, I saw something I had never seen in any creature's eyes before. Courage dying but still alive. A gust of wind swept through. The puppies pressed closer to her belly, searching for warmth in a body already fading. She shifted slightly painfully and nudged one of them toward me as if to say, "Save them first." I froze. In that moment, I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my own heart. I wanted to shout to call someone, but my throat locked. "It's okay. It's okay, girl," I whispered, though my hands trembled too much to unfasten the chain. I searched around desperately. There was nothing, only a rusted beer can, a few snapped cables, and a long drag mark where the chain had been pulled. No food, no water, just mudblood and a dying will to live. She whimpered the sound, thin and brittle like wind slipping through a pipe. I knew she was trying to say something, and there in that freezing light I couldn't stand by any longer. "I'm here, girl," I murmured. I pulled off my gloves, took out my pocket knife, and began cutting through the chain link by link. The screech of metal grinding against metal pierced the air like needles. Each time I pulled, she flinched but didn't fight. She only looked at me. And in that look there was no fear left, only trust. I didn't know if I was shaking from the cold or from the terror of hurting her. Blood welled around her neck. I wiped it with my sleeve, tore off a piece of my shirt, and wrapped it gently. The puppies clung to each other, eyes still closed, mouths searching for their mother's warmth. I could hear their faint cries, small, desperate sounds that cut straight through my chest. When the final link snapped free, I heard a sound behind me. I turned. A boy, maybe 16, stood a few yards away, holding his phone up, recording. His face was pale, his voice trembling. "Sir, can I record this? To call someone for help?" I looked from him to the Doberman. My lips barely moved. "Record it, kid. Let them see her. Don't record me." He nodded, tears spilling behind his glasses. I heard the soft click. The video had begun. A cold gust swept through, lifting flakes of rust into the air. My hands were slick with blood as I held her head off the ground. "Stay with me, Raven," I said, though I didn't know her name. "Please, don't leave me." She answered with a raspy breath and nudged her muzzle weakly against my palm. No one prepares you for a moment like that. No one teaches you how to hold life in your hands when your own heart is breaking apart. I looked up. Above us, a freight train rumbled across the bridge. The light slipped through the steel beams and fell right across her neck where the chain had been, and for an instant it gleamed like it was burning away. In that moment I knew I couldn't walk away. "If you're watching this," I said, staring into the boy's camera, "don't just cry. Stop. Share. Do something, anything, so that creatures like her are seen. Somewhere out there, someone else is still chained like this. The only difference is, no one's found them yet. And as I finished speaking, the Doberman exhaled a long, trembling breath and closed her eyes. I thought she was gone. But then her tail moved, just once, small, but real. My whole body froze. That tiny motion, no bigger than a comma, split the line between death and life. My heart pounded wildly. And in that terrible silence, I realized sometimes miracles don't fall from heaven. They rise from the ones the world left behind. I didn't leave right away, partly because I was afraid that if I moved, she would stop breathing, partly because I had never seen a gaze that made me feel so ashamed. I'd lived in Cleveland my whole life in old Brooklyn, where the old auto plant sat abandoned and the streets were cracked like scars. People here were used to seeing trash, but no one ever called it by its name. And yet that morning I had called her Raven. The name slipped out of my head like an instinct. I pulled out my phone and called Riverview Animal ER. Only a cold, recorded voice answered. "If this is an emergency, please leave a message." I left one, stammering, my voice shaking. A Doberman, mother, chained under the Cuyahoga Bridge. 2 pups alive. I need help now. No one called back. The wind stung my cheeks. I took off my coat and laid it over Raven. Her skin was as cold as steel. The 2 puppies tucked themselves under the fabric, finding warmth from the same person who had just saved them. A second later, I realized that coat might be the only thing between them and death. Above us, sunlight pierced through the bridge beams, striping the stained concrete wall. There were red streaks there, not paint. I didn't let myself think about it. I only knew I had to move her. She was still breathing, each rise weak like a clock about to stop. "Raven, I'm taking you to the hospital. Don't give up, okay?" She didn't answer. But when I touched the chain, her tail flicked a small, trembling echo of life. A clatter of wheels behind me. I turned. Micah was pushing a skateboard toward me, sweat dotting his forehead. "Did you reach anyone?" I asked. I posted it. "People are sharing it, sir. The cafe lady nearby said she's bringing a blanket." I nodded. "Good job, kid." 10 minutes later, Jen, the cafe owner, ran up. She carried a blanket, a warm bottle of water, and a look that was equal parts fear and determination. My God, who could do this to a creature? That question didn't need an answer. We worked together without many words. I lifted Raven with both arms, trying not to touch her neck. Jen opened the blanket and draped it over her. Every movement was slow, careful, like holding a child with broken bones. Where are the puppies? Under my coat. When I stood, my knees were stiff from kneeling so long, but my heart was pounding harder than ever. We had no stretcher, no carrier. Jen found an abandoned handcart behind her shop, and Micah lined it with towels and cardboard. "Here, sir. Just set her on this." "Thank you, Micah." I placed Raven in the middle with the 2 puppies lying on their mother's chest. When I bent down, one of them opened its mouth and made a tiny sound weak as a whisper from a dream. Raven turned her head slowly and licked its forehead. In that moment, I saw it clearly. A mother is still a mother even when her body is breaking. We began to push the cart up the small slope toward the main road. The ground was uneven, the wheels rattling, but I kept the cart steady. The river wind carried the smell of burnt steel and industrial dust, but through the metal and grime, I could smell survival. A woman pulled her car over and rolled down the window. "What are you doing?" "Saving a life," I answered, just 2 words. She looked down at Raven and burst into tears. Without another question, she opened her trunk, pulled out a large towel, and handed it to Jen. "Use this. I'll post to the community group. There's an emergency vet on Lorraine Road." We thanked her and kept moving, 1 step at a time. Each yard of pavement passed like a scene in slow motion. I could hear metal clinking, the old chain still wrapped around Raven's neck jingling with each bump. She whimpered when the cart jolted. I kept repeating in my head, "Don't sleep. Don't leave me." At the final turn, I saw a group of construction workers on their lunch break. One of them spotted us, dropped his sandwich, and ran over. "Need a ride? I've got a pickup. If you're willing to drive, we can go now." He didn't ask anything else. We lifted Raven onto the tarp in the back of the truck. Jen held her head while Micah cradled the two pups. I sat in the back, my hands still on Raven's neck. Her breathing was weak but steady. Her eyes opened slightly and met mine. I thought she knew the fight to live had just begun. As the truck pulled away from the riverside, I looked back at the spot where she had lain. Only a pool of blood and the broken chain remained lying there like evidence of a sin this city needed to remember. The wind blew through cold but clean, and over the hum of the engine I heard myself whisper, "Raven, this time. You're not alone anymore." The pickup sped through the heart of Cleveland. The sky hung heavy and gray, the wind slicing through the air like knives. I sat in the back, a blanket wrapped around Raven, my hands holding her head on my lap. Her blood seeped into my shirt, cold, sticky, and real. I could hear only two things, the steady growl of the engine and her ragged breathing, thin as thread. Micah held the two puppies close to his chest, trembling as he whispered, "She's going to be okay, right, sir?" I didn't answer. I was afraid that if I lied, he'd lose faith in the whole world. Every pothole, every bump, made Raven whimper softly. She no longer had the strength to open her eyes, but her tail twitched faintly whenever I spoke. "Hang on, girl. We're almost there." We stopped in front of Riverview Animal ER. The driver, Ramon, the construction worker, jumped out of the cab and shouted into the building. Emergency Doberman chained, bleeding out two pups. The glass doors slid open, and a woman's firm voice called out, "Code Red. Get a stretcher now." 3 people rushed out, Dr. Grace Mitchell, Nurse Elena, and a young man pushing the gurney. Before I could say a word, they were already in motion. Grace glanced at Raven. Fingers pressed to her neck, checking for a pulse. She spoke quickly, almost without breathing. "Severe dehydration, hypothermia, deep neck laceration, muscle exposure. She needs fluids and oxygen now." Elena slipped the oxygen tube in place and set the IV. I stepped back, my hands still sticky with blood. They wheeled the gurney through the double doors. The red sign above lit up "No entry." I stood there, heart pounding so hard it hurt my ribs. Jen handed me a cup of hot coffee, but my hands were too numb to hold it. Micah sat on the floor, clutching the puppies, his wide eyes fixed on the door. Time stopped moving. The world blurred until only the harsh white glow of fluorescent lights remained. I kept seeing Raven's eyes beneath the bridge. Those eyes didn't belong to something that gives up. I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself to believe she was still fighting behind that door. Then a beeping sound. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. My heart dropped. Elena burst out, her face pale. "She's hemorrhaging fast. We need canine-compatible blood." "Do you know anyone Ramon cut her off? I work at Fire Station 19. There's a Shepherd canine on our team he can donate." Grace glanced at the clock. If he's here in 10 minutes, she still has a chance. Ramon didn't wait. He ran out the door, already on his phone. Elena went back inside the doors, swinging shut again. I stood there, my pulse thudding like hammer blows against steel. Micah set the puppies on my lap. "Hold them for me, sir. I'll get water." I looked down at the tiny bodies curled in the brown towel. One of them opened its eyes, a faint blue-gray like morning mist. It tried to crawl upward, sniffing for its mother's scent, then stopped trembling. I pressed my palm gently against its back. "She's still fighting, kiddo. Just like you." Exactly 10 minutes later, Ramon returned with 2 firefighters. They carried a blood bag and tubing. Grace opened the door, waving them in. "Move! Bring it in fast." I caught a glimpse of Raven lying on the steel table, her body shivering in rhythm with the heart monitor. Her chest rose and fell weakly. Grace connected the transfusion line, her focus sharp as if performing surgery on a battlefield. "Flow at 30. Come on, girl." Elena stroked Raven's head softly. I stood against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. 1 minute, 2, 3. The monitor began to beep steadily. Grace lifted her head, a small smile breaking through. "She can hear us." Her heart's back. The room exhaled all at once. I had to hold on to the wall to keep from collapsing. Elena turned her voice hoarse with emotion. "You can come in, but stay back. She's still fragile." I stepped forward slowly. The room glowed cold and sterile, the air thick with antiseptic and blood. Raven lay still, her neck wrapped in clean white bandages, a small oxygen tube resting at her muzzle. When I leaned down, she opened her eyes only for half a second, but long enough for me to see that faint light had returned. I spoke quietly, afraid even my breath might break the moment. "Welcome back, Raven." She didn't move, only exhaled a long, trembling sigh. But in that breath, something had changed. It felt like she was agreeing to stay one more day. I don't remember when the tears started, only that when Grace touched my shoulder and said, "She'll live, but we'll still need a little miracle." I could only nod, because in that moment I understood the miracle wasn't just that she survived. It was that every soul in that room believed again in a life the world had once abandoned. 3 days after Raven was rescued, the hospital lay under the cold light of a Cleveland winter. Every morning I was there. No one asked me to be. No one invited me. I just couldn't leave. She lay in the isolation unit, bandaged from neck to chest. On the wall, the monitor still flickered its steady beeps like the heartbeat of the whole room. I sat in the corner, a cold cup of coffee in my hand, watching her breathe, each breath fragile yet stubborn. Elena, the young nurse, whispered as she changed Raven's bandages, "I've never seen one this strong." Her neck was torn almost to the artery, yet she still tried to lick her pups. I saw her hands tremble and spoke quietly. "She's not fighting for herself. She's fighting for something bigger." Elena looked up. "You know what that feels like?" I gave a small smile, all too well. I had never told anyone about last year. The night my wife died, I sat in my car for 7 hours and never walked into the hospital. I was afraid to see her for the last time. From that night on, I stayed away from anyone dying. Until Raven. At first, every time I stepped closer, she tensed. In those early days, even the sound of my shoes on the floor made her growl softly, a thin hiss, not from anger, but fear. I stopped, didn't push. I sat a few feet away and spoke just loud enough for her to hear. "No one's going to hurt you now. I'm just talking." Slowly, she began to look at me longer. She stopped, turning away from my eyes. On the 4th afternoon, when Elena dropped a metal tray on the floor, Raven flinched, bared her teeth, eyes wild with panic. But instead of lunging, she backed up, shaking. Elena froze. "It's okay, girl, it's okay," she said softly, her voice like a lullaby. I stayed still, not moving closer. It took almost 5 minutes before Raven lay down again, her breathing steadying. Elena glanced at me and murmured, "That's not aggression. That's memory." I understood. People can teach animals to fear light noise, even a hand the things that once hurt them. But they forget that memory doesn't live in the head. It lives in the body. Every time Raven trembled, I saw myself in her, someone who once curled up inside his own memories. That night I stayed later than usual. Rain began to patter on the tin roof. Elena had gone home. It was just me and her. Raven lay still, eyes closed. I switched on a small yellow lamp, warmer, softer than the hospital's cold white lights. I pulled the chair closer and whispered, "I know. You don't trust anyone anymore. Neither do I. But maybe, trusting again is the only way to survive." I told her about the bridge, about how I once thought my life had nothing left worth doing. About the day I lost everything. I didn't know why I kept talking, knowing she couldn't understand human words. But somehow I felt she was listening. She opened her eyes and looked at me for a long time. The look was different now. No longer fear, but a quiet kind of understanding. Then she did something that made my throat close up. She moved her muzzle toward me and touched the back of my hand with a small lick. Just once. But it was enough to make me cry. I buried my face in my hands, hot tears spilling real and unstoppable. "Thank you, girl," I whispered hoarsely. "Thank you for trusting me, even after humans nearly killed you." The monitor kept its steady beat. Outside, the rain tapped lightly against the window like a faraway drum. I sat there without another word. As the lights dimmed, she curled up. For the first time since we brought her in, Raven slept without jerking awake. Her legs stretched out, her mouth slightly open, breathing deep. I left the room close to midnight. Before stepping out, I looked back. The glow from the monitor reflected off the white bandage around her neck, making it look like a faint halo. I knew she hadn't won yet, but for the first time she wasn't fighting alone. Outside, Cleveland's air was still bitterly cold. But as I stepped through the hospital doors, my hands were still warm, the warmth of a living soul, learning again how to trust the world. 2 days later, Raven spiked a fever. Her body temperature rose fast, sweat soaking through the bandages. Elena checked her pulse and shook her head softly. "She's reacting to the antibiotics. Her body's too weak." I stood beside the bed, feeling as though even the draft coming in from the door had turned colder. Raven's breaths were rapid and shallow, as if every inhale was a small battle. "Is there anything else we can do?" I asked. Grace stepped forward with the chart in her hand. "We can try another transfusion, but the risk is high. If her heart stops, we may not be able to bring her back." I looked down at her half-closed eyes, the slight twitch of her nose. I thought about that morning under the bridge, about those wet, defiant eyes. "Do it," I said hoarsely. "We pulled her out of hell. Don't let her die in heaven." Grace met my eyes and gave a small nod. "All right, prep the room." While they prepared, I sat outside in the hallway. Elena laid a hand on my shoulder. "You should get some rest." "I can't." I gave a tired smile. "The last time I left someone on an operating table, I lost my whole life." She didn't ask what I meant. Inside, the sounds of suction and the nurse's orders came out in steady bursts. I leaned against the wall, looking up at the ceiling, forcing myself to breathe. On my phone, I opened the photo I'd taken when I first found Raven. Her body caked in mud and blood, the 2 pups curled inside my coat. I posted it on the local rescue page without thinking, just writing a few lines. "Her name is Raven. She was chained and abandoned under the Cuyahoga Bridge. We're fighting to keep her alive." I didn't wait for responses. I just needed to speak. But within 10 minutes, the screen began to vibrate over and over. Comments, shares, messages. A stranger wrote, "I'm in Toledo, I want to donate." Another, "I lost a dog just like her. Praying she makes it." The whole city seemed to wake up. Hearts quietly connecting on a thread of compassion. Elena ran out. "She's crashing. We're starting compressions." I jumped up. The red light above the room flashed. My own heart seemed to stop with the monitor's tone. Harsh beeps rang out. 1 beat, then nothing. Grace's voice cut through adrenaline. Now I stood outside, fists pounding the wall, my vision blurring. I didn't pray. I hadn't believed in miracles for a long time. But in that second, I whispered, If someone out there can hear me, please don't take her." A sound broke through, small but enough to make everyone pause. Beep, then beep beep. Elena exhaled hard and slumped into a chair. Grace pulled off her gloves, sweat beading on her forehead. She's back. Her heart's beating again. I stepped inside. Raven lay still, her chest rising, weakly, eyes closed. I placed my hand on her neck. Warm, not fever, warm, but truly warm. "Good girl," I whispered. "You won again." Elena smiled at me. "You know what? That video you posted is going everywhere. Raven's got an army praying for her now." I opened my phone. 42,000 shares. Thousands of comments. One person wrote, "I'm in the hospital with cancer. If she's still fighting, I will too." Another, "I've been abused my whole life. Seeing her survive makes me believe I can." I read line after line, feeling my heart tremble. Beside me, Raven's breathing deepened. The heart monitor steadied into a rhythm. Outside the window, snow began to fall, soft and quiet. I looked up at the gray sky. That night I realized sometimes a creature who cannot speak teaches humans how to hope. The next morning, the hospital was wrapped in a soft, dim light. The rain from the night before had stopped, leaving only a pale mist clinging to the windows. I arrived earlier than usual. Elena was changing Raven's bandages while Grace stood by the counter checking her vitals. I stepped inside, and before I could say a word, Raven opened her eyes. It wasn't the vague flutter of someone half-conscious, it was clear aware. Those deep brown eyes met mine, truly seeing me for the first time. Grace smiled gently. "Good morning, brave girl." I moved closer. She didn't growl, didn't shrink away. Instead, she lifted her muzzle slightly toward me, sniffing softly as if to make sure I was real. I reached out, hesitating. She licked my fingertips, a short, warm, trembling touch. My chest tightened. Elena whispered, "You should keep talking to her. I think she remembers your voice." I leaned in and spoke quietly. "Raven, it's me. We're okay now. You made it through." Her ears twitched. Slowly, she turned her head toward the corner of the room, toward the incubator that held her two sleeping pups. Elena followed her gaze and understood immediately. "I think it's time." Grace nodded and went to retrieve the small box. She lifted the tiny pups one by one, their soft cries barely louder than whispers, but full of life. I knelt beside Raven. When Grace set the two pups down on the white blanket in front of her, Raven trembled. She didn't lunge forward or bark. She just lay there, eyes flooded with something beyond words. Joy, fear, wonder, all at once. The pups nudged against her legs, crawling clumsily. One stumbled against her bandage, rolled onto its back, and whimpered. Raven lowered her head and licked it gently. Once. Then again. My throat closed up. Elena covered her mouth. Grace bowed her head, wiping a tear. No one spoke because there were no words for what we were witnessing. Raven pressed her muzzle against her puppies, drawing them close to her chest. Her breathing was heavy but steady. Every movement was slow, careful, as if she were afraid of disturbing something sacred. The whole room fell silent. Only the steady beeping of the heart monitor remained, like the pulse of the world syncing with hers. I sat beside her, whispering more to myself than to anyone. "You did it, Raven. You kept them alive. And they're the reason you stayed." One of the pups opened its eyes. They were still cloudy but bright, reflecting the image of their mother who had walked through hell to bring them back into the light. Elena laid a hand on my shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. "I think she just taught us something about motherhood that people have forgotten." I nodded, and about trust. Grace took a photo, not to post, but to keep. A Doberman mother. Her neck, still wrapped in white, was lying between her two tiny pups as sunlight streamed through the window like a baptism. I'd never believed in miracles before, but in that moment I did. Raven lifted her head and looked at me. She didn't need words. One glance was enough, thank you. I placed my hand gently on her forehead and whispered, "Don't thank me, girl. Thank you for living." Outside, the first sunlight in 7 days broke through the glass, spilling across the steel table in a shimmer of gold. The whole room seemed to glow. And in that silence I could hear it, the soft, steady sound of 3 hearts beating together, real and in perfect rhythm. 2 weeks later, Raven could stand on her own. Her first steps were shaky, weak, but proud. The same legs that had once been chained now touched the floor as if it were sacred ground. Her 2 pups tumbled around her, falling and rising again, chirping with joy. The whole hospital stopped when they saw it. Elena burst into tears. Grace smiled, lifted her phone, and said only one thing: "Let the world see this." The video of Raven taking her first 3 steps spread faster than any news in the city. Thousands of comments poured in, messages of hope, gratitude, and love from everywhere. One woman wrote, "I was ready to give up. But if Raven can stand again, so can I." I came every morning, made coffee for the team, cleaned kennels, and mopped floors. I wasn't coming out of duty anymore. I came because I owed her a debt of faith. The day the doctors announced Raven was ready for discharge, everyone gathered. The white bandages were gone, leaving only a thin scar like a silver thread glinting under sunlight. I knelt down and fastened a new blue collar around her neck, engraved with small words, "Raven, you are loved." When I opened the car door, she turned her head toward the clinic one last time, the place that had been both battlefield and birthplace. Then she stepped up her pups, following their tiny tails wagging. My home wasn't much, just a small apartment in old Brooklyn, but when she crossed the threshold, the light inside seemed warmer than ever. She lay down on the rug in the living room, her pups curled tight against her side, breathing softly. I sat beside her, my hand resting on her back. "We're home now, Raven." She lifted her head, eyes bright and clear, then exhaled a long, steady breath, the sound of peace from one who had survived. I had never believed an animal could change a person. But she did. She made me believe that kindness, no matter how small, can awaken the human heart in this world again. As night fell, I looked at the 3 shapes resting on the floor, listened to their breathing, and whispered to myself, sometimes, when we save a life, we end up being saved too. And with Raven, that miracle truly happened. If you're still here listening, thank you. You just helped save another life simply by staying. Tell me, have you ever rescued an animal? Is it still with you? Share your story in the comments below. And if you believe that kindness can still change the world, subscribe so together we can make sure that miracles like Raven's never disappear.